good time zone to you all, because it is certainly not morning everywhere, though it is still morning for us here on the West Coast. And welcome to our continuing Andor spoiler reviews here on Fandom Entertainment. I am Emma Fyffe, joined this week by Lawton Harris.
Hello, hello.
And Kim Taylor Foster.
Hello.
It's certainly evening for you, Kim. Now, Kim, once again, we don't see a cocktail. That's exclusively for She-Hulk reviews?
That is until they start introducing more regular cocktails in Star Wars. I won't be drinking cocktails during these reviews. But you never know. I could have a collection of milks.
That's correct.
Yeah, they're more. I mean, there are Star Wars. There's a lot of like cantina, nightclub stuff. Not these characters. These are more rough, hard scrabble. They're living in the woods. They're not having a lot of coffee.
I was gonna say, I believe that in the very beginning of this episode, they were drinking caf, which is the Star Wars version of coffee.
Right. Yes.
But yeah, I'm not sure if like canonically we've gotten too many Star Wars like cocktails and liquors named. It certainly exists within kind of like the expanded universe now, Legends.
Well, and we've seen scenes where people are presumably drinking something,
sure,
like where they're on Paul Bettany's space yacht in Solo, or in all these various cantina scenes. They've got drinks.
In the first episode of this series, he was in the bar.
I'm sure in that brothel you could go. There's a bar against the wall, and in Jennifer Beals Casino in Boba Fett, I'm sure there were drinks on hand.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure how easy it is to get the ingredients for a Star Wars cocktail.
Fair. Yeah. I
mean, you gotta get one of those like powders that Rey is like cooking up and bubbling into.
I think that I don't know if canonically or legendarily there's like Corellian fire whiskey, or I might be making that up. I'll have to look.
Romulan ale, the Star Trek version. Yeah.
Heresy.
Anyway, welcome to Fictional Liquor Talk here on Fandom Entertainment. Actually, I did want to point out that we may need somebody on standby in case Kim removes her choker and her head falls off. We were having a whole conversation prior to going live about where that folklore comes from. So if anybody in chat can look up the folklore of the girl with the green ribbon and let us know the history, we will like you.
Yeah.
I mean, we already like you for being here. Again, full spoilers. This is your warning. If you have not watched the episode yet, this is Andor, episode 6, The Eye, which interestingly, Rings of Power episode 7 was also called The Eye.
Yeah.
So thematically, a lot of eyes over the course of the last week. So you have been warned. We are now in full spoiler territory. Let us start with you, Lon Harris. Lon, tell me your initial thoughts stepping away from this episode.
Great episode. I mean, I think we're now learning, after 2 sets of 3 Andors,
yes.
I think we've learned what the format is like. They're going to be told in these kind of sets of 3. So part 1 is sort of the introduction to whatever the new plot line is. In this case, he's going on this space heist. He's going to steal the payroll from this Imperial base. And then episode 2, we got sort of the plan and him getting to know the team and all of the world building. And now the third episode of that sequence, we get the big payoff where they're actually doing the heist. And there's all the action and the tension and the excitement. And I thought they did an excellent job of making it really like a thriller. I mean, it really works like a thriller, and it is nail biting and intense. You don't know who's going to get out of this scenario alive. It does not feel like a lot of characters have plot armor or are quote unquote safe. I mean, you're pretty sure Andor is safe because it's his show. Otherwise, it sort of feels like anything is on the table. And I love how the Gilroys, Tony and Dan, who are sort of the creative driving force behind the show, I love how they are really layering in smartly like the realities of people in different places and areas of this world. And like they're really giving it a lot of specific thought about how people who work for the Empire feel about the local population of these planets where they're stationed, and, you know, how they think about crime in the Empire, and how the rebels are all like, you're you know that you're aligned with these other people against the Empire, but everybody has their own agendas. And we get, you get tastes of that in the Star Wars movies where they're not sure if they could trust Han at first because he's this smuggler and this rogue. But now you realize the daily reality of living in that world where you'd never know if you could trust anybody. Everybody's got their own secret agenda working.
Well, and it is interesting too, you obviously were presented with this idea of, can we really trust Han Solo? Is he just doing this for the money? And then, but there's, I think that, and this is not a knock on Star Wars, this is just what it is. I think there is a little bit of a safeness to it, wherein even if Han left, that would be it. He would leave, and there wouldn't be any additional sort of fallout from that. They'd probably find him again later and convince him to get back into the crew. But I think that I agree with you that in Andor, we are really truly seeing the consequences of people weighing whether or not they are completely on board with everything that's going on. And certainly, Kim, this episode opens up with this really lovely moment between sweet little Nemik and Cassian, and they're having this discussion about sort of the ideology of the rebellion. And I wonder, what was sort of your takeaway from that interaction?
Well, I think it sets up Nemik as this beacon of hope and faith, and he talks about his faith at one point in this episode. And we know that, one of the sayings throughout Star Wars is rebellions are built on hope. But Cassian doesn't necessarily believe that at this stage in his story. And I think, we know at the end of this episode, spoilers, he dies, not Cassian, Nemik. And the point of that is to martyr him, and obviously for Cassian to inherit his manifesto and go forth and be a better person. The Cassian that we first met, or that we will come to know from Rogue One.
From Rogue One.
Way you look at it,
future Cassian.
Was always morally grey, but I think perhaps less on the darker side of that than he is right now. So this is one of those moments that kind of is a catalyst for change in Cassian.
Picking up on that too, the Cassian that we meet in Rogue One, he's got this very tough exterior. He doesn't immediately care about the people he's on this mission with. It's not like hey, let's get to know each other. We're going to be working together. And this, I think, is going back and sort of showing us how that came about. He's been on these this isn't his first rodeo. He's been on these teams. He's been on these unlikely missions, these suicide runs before. He knows they're probably not all going to get out of it. And look, I don't need to bond with every new person I come into contact with on every one of these new teams. And I think the way that this kind of mirrors the Rogue One mission in those ways is sort of, it doesn't feel repetitive. It feels informative. This was a key experience in sort of letting the future Cassian know what this was sort of all about.
Yeah. And again, one of the things that has continued to impress me about Andor is, again, this real exploration of the humanity of the people who are involved in all of the various organizations, because there's a lot in this, obviously, with Commander J-Hold, who they're supposed to escort, and that's kind of how they're getting into the base, because they need his handprint, basically, I guess, to open up the vault to get into the payroll. And the scene with him and his wife and son, where he's complaining about how his son is sick, it's so amazing to just see this very toxic family dynamic playing out in a really real sort of way.
I think there's been a theme throughout all of Andor of people who have families that are close with their families don't appreciate their families. There's the Cyril and his mom, where he obviously is pained having to spend time with his mother and he can't stand her. And then there was Mon Mothma and her crappy daughter who's given her tons of lip and doesn't respect her. And then we saw this unhappy family again this week. And I think it's a show that's so populated by orphans or people who estranged from their families or lost their families or were taken away or saw their families killed. And I think we're kind of getting the world from that perspective of, if you are a person who really understands the importance of families because yours was taken away from you, you kind of get this, like, people don't appreciate what they have.
Yeah.
In terms
But
of people
also,
who do have families.
I think there's an element of it being the idea that everyone has their own rebellion. Which was said, I think, last week, is something that is something that everyone goes through. So in families, kids are rebelling against parents. You've got the kid in this, J-Hold's kid. He doesn't want to wear his imperial blouse. A small sign of him wanting to rebel, but it's there. And the wife, she doesn't want to be stationed on Aldhani. She wants to rebel against that. She wants to leave. So so all the characters exhibit it on different levels.
Yeah. And it's interesting, too, because kind of echoing back to the conversation that Cassian has with Nemik at the beginning of the episode, they have this conversation about the idea that the Empire doesn't play by the rules because they don't care to learn them. And they also, but also the idea of kind of exploiting that they don't care to learn the rules, and they really do believe themselves to be superior to everyone, which we certainly see, I think, in their treatment of the Donnie, the people of Aldhani.
Yeah, I mean, that also, I think, echoes what Stellan Skarsgård's character, whose name I'm blanking on now, was saying a few weeks ago, or the
Luthen.
Yeah, Luthen. There you go. The conversation that he and Cassian were having about they can get away with so much now because the Empire doesn't respect the rebellion at all. It doesn't even believe the one sort of official who's saying it's an organized rebellion. They're like, nah, it's just a bunch of rogues and thieves stealing from us. And so I think that's what we're going to see sort of playing out over these 2 seasons of Andor is how the rebellion came to be seen as a significant enough threat that the Empire does become really like aware of them and is monitoring them and is paying attention to them and what they do because they are seen as now a legitimate rival instead of just
Yeah, because I mean, this is very much a sort of catalyst situation that we are observing here. I mean, especially based on the way Luthen celebrates at the end of the episode, where he kind of goes into the back room when the officer comes in and is like, "Oh, do you have anything from Aldhani?" And he's totally joking about it, but Luthen's like, "Oh, let me go look in the back." And he's just so, because that is the thing that is crazy, is that like on a fundamental level, technically, this mission has a decent modicum of success.
Yeah. They get away with a lot of the money.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but a lot of it.
A lot of it. And ultimately
80 million imperial credits, however much that is.
40 million apiece.
I don't know what that is in US dollars 2022, but
but I mean, I think that is kind of the thing is that it's absolutely brutal what we're seeing. And I think again, just kind of jumping ahead to the end, the interaction between Skeen and Cassian when they're at the doctor's and they're outside and he's brought up, oh yeah, we did get away with 80 million Imperial credits. Yeah. We can take 40 million apiece. I can't fly the freighter. You fly us out of here. We can split. I'll forget about you. Mm-hmm. And again, and he also brought up that idea, Kim, that you were talking about of like, he's like, yeah, there's a rebellion. It's me versus everybody.
Right. Well, and yeah, again, like that idea I like so much of, the last 2 weeks, our plot concern as viewers has been, is Skeen, the true believer, going to accept Cassian as one of his own, this guy who's coming from outside? And that was the argument about Cassian, was like, this guy's just a mercenary. He's not a true believer. He's not dedicated to the cause like I am. And then to have him be the one who's really like flipping, he was projecting the whole time. That's so true. There's that nugget of reality to it, that is how people behave. When you're going to be the turncoat, you're the one who's extra loud about everybody else. Like, can we trust this guy? And like, I like that it's so carefully observed. It has the texture of reality like that.
Yeah.
And it made it extra surprising too when he ends up being the turncoat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, although I think it does spotlight it when you go back with knowing that that's what happens. But he's quite unpredictable, isn't he? When he holds the knife in the last episode to Cassian's throat, and he just feels kind of skittish. I think the whole time you get that feeling that something's not right about him, and then And then he goes and betrays them all, or attempts to.
Yeah.
And I was bummed because initially I was kind of excited that he'd made it out, but that's probably directly related to the fact that I just finished watching The Bear.
The Bear, yeah. That's part of it, is that I like that guy so much. He plays Richie in The Bear.
He plays kind of a lovable
Moss
asshole
Baccarat,
in The Bear. And in this, it turns out, he just kind of sucks.
Did you recognize that he was also Micro in the Netflix Punisher series?
Yeah,
I did not.
he was.
I didn't. It took me forever to realize that.
I realized that when Barenthal shows up in The Bear, I was like, oh, wait.
I put that together like last week.
Huh.
I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Well, to be fair, I also put that together last week because that is about when I finished watching The Bear.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, I watched The Bear first.
If you have not watched The Bear on Hulu, highly
good.
recommend.
So good.
Excellent show. But so is it. I put The Bear in my top shows of 2022. Andor is really making a run.
Yeah, no, that guy's
really gunning for it.
That guy's on a crazy run right now.
Yeah, and again, I continue to be so impressed with this show, and I think that one of the ways that this episode was incredibly successful was in how it built tension around this heist that they were pulling off in a way that was very, very believable and truly had me go, I don't know who's going to live or die.
Yeah. It doesn't do the thing, like the heist thing that every heist movie and show does, where before the heist, like, think of the classic Soderbergh Ocean's 11. Like, before the heist, you get the scene where they describe what the heist is going to be to you. You get, Clooney in voiceover, like, okay, there's 2 vaults. We go in here, and then the acrobat gets out. He goes up here. And, like, we get why you usually do that, so that we have
follow
context
along.
and we can follow along. But they purposefully don't do that here, so that the heist is unfolding and we are discovering the next step along with them as they do it. Mm-hmm. And it creates tension in a very different way that I didn't see coming, that was very effective, where you're like, the whole time you're like, what are they going to do next? How are they going to get out of this? Like, It seems like this is the wrong place for them to be.
Yeah. All of the things that you feel, the tension, their fear, the urgency, their shouting, it's all so palpable in a way that I can't remember the last time I felt that watching a heist like this.
Yeah.
It was so realistic. The anxiety, oh God, my nerves were shredded.
He steals a bit, and I mean steals in the kindest way. It's an homage.
Yeah.
It's the kind of the climax of Apocalypse Now a little bit. When you cut, because you're cutting between this sort of ritual with the chanting, and that gives you this like beat, this like percussive. We keep cutting back to that, and that the ritual and hearing those voices, and then we're cutting back to the violence and the rest of the heist, and it is what Coppola does when they're killing Colonel Kurtz at the end of Apocalypse Now. But it was very effective here. It like gives that whole scene, it really feels like a set piece that you're watching unfold all together in one, montage. Yeah,
I continue to be so impressed by the scoring of this show. Nicholas Britell, who is the composer on it, just does such a good job of creating music that really supports the scenes that are going on, in terms of like helping to build the tension, like when Vel and Cinta are up on the wall. And I truly, when they were waiting for her to make the call to be like, yes, we're going to start this heist, and they like came in and surprised the family that they were taking hostage outside the vault. Mm-hmm. Like, it was all so well done. And when Vel was hesitating, and again, it's like, you get why she's hesitating. This is a very dangerous mission that they're undertaking, made even more dangerous by the fact that we, the audience, don't really know what their like infiltration plan is. Again, a very intentional decision to not lay that all out for you.
Yeah, there's no scene there. You keep waiting for them to stand around the table with the model and the okay, we go in here, and like that. Every movie and show does that.
But it's like, no, instead the audience, the writers trust the audience to have paid attention to the fact that previously they've discussed that they've been on this planet making this plan for ages, and so we just have to trust that they have a plan.
And it's all been about, we know what they've been doing to prep. They've been monitoring the movements of these Imperial troops. They've been watching the front of this base and how people get in and out and who goes in and out. They've got this guy on the inside who knows the whole layout and where everything is. They know people are going to be distracted. So we're using all these context clues to like in real time kind of put together what's happening, and it's very effective, and it looks simple, but it's hard to put a sequence like that together.
Yeah, it's really just, again, it's impressive, and as you brought up, Lon, the like back and forth just like really keeps a rhythm of it going forward. And I have to say that like when they do manage to escape, and it's like in the midst of this like sort of beautiful aurora borealis lights kind of thing,
meteor shower
this
thing.
meteor shower thing. I feel
one thing I liked about that juxtaposition of those two things is that you've got the indigenous people with their ritual, you might call it primitive, and then you've got the both the rebels and the Empire are using this ceremony and this natural event for their own purposes.
Cover, really.
As cover for the rebels, and the Empire tends to exploit it for their own imperialistic ways. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool too. And I also think that the scene where they do take off and they're flying through the lights, like that's some of the prettiest space flying I feel like I've seen in Star Wars.
It was very cool. It was very effective.
And also on the TIE fighters, and the TIE fighter windows.
Yeah, exactly. Because they do manage to, like, even though initially things are going okay with the heist and they shut off the Imperial's comms, eventually they kind of bungle it and
I mean it's the episode, I think you notice or notably it has so much momentum though. You get pulled through the whole time. It's a longer than average episode, but it's got this like through line, and it really has like an engine, a narrative engine, and I think so many streaming shows, that's the thing, even if we don't notice why, they feel like they kind of drag. It feels like it's sort of like a lot of characters are kind of standing around. It's like, what happens next? Or I think we've even pointed it out in Honest Trailers. There's a lot of scenes in shows where it's like, well, what do we do now? And it's like, that never happens in Andor. It's always like you're being pulled through, and this story has its own momentum, that it's just running. And it never feels like there's a lack of confidence about what is coming next and like where the story is going. You always know it's got this sort of propulsive narrative.
Yeah. Except that at the end of this episode, and obviously we as the audience, because of Rogue One, know that Andor is going to get back involved in the rebellion. But it does end with him giving Vel, because she manages to completely survive. I was so heartbroken. I knew Nemec was not going to make it because he got like crushed between.
Yeah, one of the pallets with the credits kind of crushes against the wall.
Between another one, so he was smushed by money.
he gets crushed. Yeah, it's not pretty. It's a pretty gross way to go.
I know, but he saves them because he's like helping them navigate through the meteor storm effectively.
Right. They're the way they're running the navigation system is he's like monitoring it, letting them know where to go.
Yeah. So
and they made a point earlier in I think last week's episode that navigator was very hard to work. So of course he was the only one that could operate.
The only one with the skills, the specialized skills to run it.
And Cassian to fly the vessel, which again came back into play with the whole thing with Skeen. But he shoots him. He goes in. He's like, "Hey, I'll give you 30,000 credits, I think, for the ship in the barn. I'm going to leave you with everything else. I'm just going to take my share and go. Here is this rock. Give it back to Luthen."
They really are sticking to that. It's in 3 episode bursts, like all these stories are going to be, because this really feels like the end of, it's almost like an arc, like in a comic book or an anime. Like
totally.
This really, it's not the end of the season, but it might as well be. Like it's a really closing chapter. And then that next week we'll get an introduction to whatever the next mission is, or the next chapter, or whatever the next thing Andor is going to do in his saga.
Yeah.
Find his sister at some point, I'm assuming.
But I hope Dr. Quadpaw comes back.
I know, I liked him.
Right. We haven't seen a lot of him. I really liked it when Cassian comes in pointing the gun and he puts up one set of hands, and then a few seconds later, the other set of hands goes up.
Yeah.
I don't have 4 hands, so I couldn't.
Yeah,
No,
so you
we
can't.
understand.
You gotta bring in an extra set of hands.
We'll
and
fix
then
it in post.
Yeah, we'll fix it in post.
Right.
We'll give Kim her her extra arms that she's due. So again, that's sort of where Cassian's stories end. But we do get one more scene in this episode where we are back on Coruscant, and they're at the ISB. Deirdre and all the other officers have been collected for an emergency meeting, and basically their commanding officer, Major Patragaz, I think I'm saying that right, says that they need to. Every star sector and planetary emergency retaliation plan in the building needs to be ready for presentation, because now they're actually taking the rebels seriously. Like, he's like, this isn't it's basically a lock-in. He's like, you are locked in this building until you turn those reports in. Yeah,
there's no going home until he needs 5 plans on his desk by 5.
Yep. And then we get the nice juxtaposition with Mon Mothma at the Senate. Oh, her making this plea for a thing that would create nice equal opportunities for people being met with resounding silence. It just feels a little too real world.
It's a very different Senate than the one we were watching in the prequels.
Yep.
Jar Jar destroyed it.
Yep.
I blame Jar Jar.
Jar Jar ruined it.
Senator Binks ruined it for everyone.
Senator Binks. Yeah. I do wonder, so they had previously referenced the idea that, because Cassian had been, this was I think maybe the last episode when Cassian was kind of looking over at Vel, and I think it was Skeen was like, oh, somebody else is already, sharing a bed with her. We're led to believe in this episode it's Cinta, right? Like, they're totally girlfriends.
Yes. I believe so. In the most Disney Plus,
I know
we can cut around this in different territories, but yes, the implication was that it was Cinta.
Yes, this is a running theme for anybody that's ever joined myself and Bailey for our Rings of Power watch-alongs. We are constantly yelling for characters to kiss. And I definitely did in that scene where they were on the wall.
Yeah.
Just like, kiss, let's go.
That's as close as they could get on D+.
Whatever.
They're pushing it as far as they feel like they can.
Well, you know what? I appreciate the fact that they weren't so coy about it, and at least it's some characters that we know the names of.
Yeah, that's right,
Small victories.
They got other personality traits aside from being attracted to other ladies, which is nice.
That's nice. Yes.
That's still relatively new.
Absolutely.
As far as TV goes.
Mm-hmm. And especially something as mainstream as the Disney pipeline.
Star Wars, yeah.
Yep. Anything else that y'all want to touch on before we move on to our Wikipedia segment and taking some audience questions?
I say let's do it. I feel good.
Go. Okay. First of all, we got a lot of stuff going on here at Fandom Entertainment. Kim, tomorrow is the She-Hulk finale, yes?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Me and Bailey and some extra person will be. Eric is on holiday.
Yes.
That's right. He's cruising.
Yes.
So he won't be joining us. Yes, we will be pulling apart the She-Hulk finale and hoping that lots of loose ends are tied and all our predictions are correct.
There's not that many loose ends. Yeah. It's pretty self-contained, I would say.
There's loose ends.
I mean, there's a few, who's the Hulk King, I guess. Is Mark Lynn Baker gonna settle down?
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Same time, same channel here, Fandom Entertainment. Come back for our She-Hulk finale review tomorrow. And speaking of finales, Rings of Power.
Oh my gosh.
This is the finale of season 1. It's happening
crap.
on Friday. So we'll be doing a watch party for that over on the Twitch channel at 11 a.m. on Friday. That is twitch.tv/Fandom. Again, all you need to do is have an Amazon Prime account. You just log into that when we start the watch party, and boom, you are in business. It has been so much fun, and I really hope that y'all are able to join for that. Thank you to everybody that has been tuning into those. Also on our Twitch channel tomorrow at 3:00 p.m. Pacific time. Bailey and I will be continuing our October Fandom Game Club. We are currently playing Until Dawn from Supermassive Games, which is free to play if you have a PlayStation Plus Extra subscription. I am not sponsored by them. We are not sponsored by them, but let me tell you, it is very worth the money. There are a lot of great games on there, and we are having so much fun with Until Dawn. We played the first 2 chapters. If you want to play along and catch up on your own, you totally can. Earlier this year, we played The Quarry, which I loved, which is their most recent title. And I really loved all the characters in that game, and I wanted to save them all because they were sweet, precious little beans. I pretty much actively hate everybody in Until Dawn, so, I'm still going to try to keep them alive, but I can't say I'm not rooting for some of those awful teenagers' deaths.
It's like different slasher films.
Yeah.
Some of the Friday the 13th movies, you're like, I'm okay with these kids. I wouldn't mind if they survived. And other times, you're like, hack that guy to pieces. I don't like them.
They suck. They gotta go. So thank you so much to everybody. Be sure to subscribe to Fandom Entertainment. Hit that bell so you get notifications when we are going live, etc. And before we move on to our live chat AMA, our friends at Wikipedia have sent us another article for your consideration. We don't have anybody joining us live in studio today or having submitted a video, but how could we not choose Crunchies for this week? Crunchies, of course, being the pebble-sized cereal that was edible to humans, blue and brown in color. The spherical treats could be seen in bowls of blue milk, first appearing, of course, in Andor episode 5, The Axe Forgets. Cyril Karn is eating these when he is having a conversation with his mother.
Yeah, and I saw a tweet. Apparently, Reddit, obviously, a big community dedicated to cereal fans, like hardcore cereal. These are the people who go to real cereal conventions, not like the one in the Sandman. Actual cereal convention. And they were saying their theory is apparently in 2020 there was Trix released a special edition themed around the film Trolls World Tour, and all the crunchy pieces were 2 colors, like circles of 2 colors, spheres of 2 colors, and then they had marshmallows. And their theory is the blue-purple pieces from Trolls World Tour Trix look exactly like these, so that they think the Star Wars art department just went and picked out the blurple pieces from Trolls World Tour Trix. And that's what Crunchies are. They didn't make their own novelty cereal.
Look, the Star Wars art department previously used a women's razor as a machine that measures midichlorians. So you know what?
Yeah, we know they're getting creative and innovative, and it would also it's interesting how it would date. Like you would know, they were filming that stuff in the later half of 2020.
Yeah.
When Trolls World Tour Trix were widely available in stores nationwide,
That's pretty funny. Interestingly, on StarWars.com, which is where we got the info for what these little cereal bits are called, apparently in the script they were designated as Crunchies. So that's what they're called, at least for the time being.
You never know. In Star Wars,
you never know.
Sometimes foods are themed after all sorts of weird things. Jawa juice is always the one that throws me.
Yep.
If you go to Dexter's Diner in Coruscant, they serve something called Jawa juice. I don't want to know what that is.
I haven't tried that. I wondered
That's
if,
gross.
the Dray milk in this episode supposedly does not taste great, but I wonder if it would be nicer if you added some crunches to it.
I think it might, because I would suspect they're a sweet cereal, which when served with blue milk would be sickeningly sweet, because if blue milk is like the blue milk they served at Galaxy's Edge, it's pretty sweet and also like frosty.
I mean, their food color scheme is so different from ours. I don't feel like
true.
Our sense of what foods and what colors go with what flavors are going to be totally different in the Star Wars reality.
I feel like for the purposes of the scene, it was meant to be a sort of juvenile cereal.
Yeah, it's like a sweet cereal. Yeah.
But I mean, you're right. They could be their equivalent of like Wheaties.
Blue noodles for us would be like candy, but in their reality, it looks like a savory dish. So I don't know.
Yeah, you never know. And also, this is per the StarWars.com episode trivia gallery. In Cyril's bedroom in episode 5, this is interesting, he has action figures of clone troopers.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Deep in the background.
Sure,
so there
he
you
would have
go.
grown up with that,
He definitely would have grown up with that. Yep. So that, thank you again to our wonderful Wikipedia community for always providing us with great Star Wars insights to share here during our Andor reviews.
Such dedication.
Such dedication. All right, let's move on to our live chat AMA. So first of all, Xeno Hour says, between Rogue One and Andor, I think it's great they're showing the gray side of the rebellion. The good guys took a kid hostage after all.
Yeah, it is good. You know, they talk about how and you mentioned it earlier, Emma, that the Empire aren't playing by the rules. And of course, you know, neither should they really if they hope to get anywhere with their rebellion. The odds are against them after all. And it's interesting in that moment when they first take the kid hostage, it is Skeen who points the gun at his head. So, you know, there's another sign that he was a little bit not good.
Yeah.
A little questionable. Yeah, I mean, I think so much of this show is telling this story of how did these disparate elements, all of these people and pockets of people and groups who hated the Empire for their own reasons with their own agendas, how did they all come together and form a unified rebellion by the time that Rogue One happens?
Yeah.
And I think that's the story, is, you know, like that's kind of the story that we're telling over the course of this whole show. And it's real history. I mean, if you look at the real history of real revolutions and real rebellions, it's always the same. It's pockets of people, very different perspectives and agendas fighting it out about how they were going to come together as a unified force.
Yeah, and again, I think that is once again a theme that keeps getting brought up throughout this episode is, you know, Vel is having a conversation. I think it was with the commander, and he basically says like, "Oh, I know you're going to kill me anyway," and she's like, "Yeah, because that's what you would do."
Right.
And so, but it's like we're kind of towing this line, and then ultimately Cassian makes the decision to kill somebody who was planning on betraying them. So it's very nebulous.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, the original view we had from A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, we were getting our perspective on the rebellion from, you know, Princess Leia, this very like upstanding moral figure. Mm-hmm. But then, you know, like Rogue One already kind of introduced this idea and played around with it. Like there were also people like Saw Gerrera.
Right, and the extremism of Saw Gerrera.
Right, and like the rebellion really was a spectrum. It wasn't all people who felt the same way that the Organas felt. It's a whole spectrum of people, some of whom had a very different take on what a rebellion should look like. And that's really cool and interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, again, we've talked a lot on this show about how what's so special about it is the fact that it doesn't feel beholden to be tonally like anything we've seen in Star Wars.
Right.
And that's really to the show's credit.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and not to say this is like a pejorative or like a negative thing, but like the Favreau-Filoni shows feel very much like they're trying to recapture the spirit of classic Star Wars. You know, these adventure serials and this throwback retro sort of vibe. And I really like that Andor is not that, and it's like, let's tell a more contemporary kind of story in a Star Wars setting.
Yeah.
I think this has a lot to say about privilege as well. You know, you mentioned Leia and the Organas, and they're coming from a place where they can afford to be moral, have this high morals. But both Skeen and Andor have a very troubled background that play into how they react to things and how they behave, and it's completely understandable. You have empathy, I think, for both characters. And a lot of the more evil characters in this series, because they're humanized, a lot of them. Even J-Hold, you know, this awful racist. There is an element of understanding, at least, where he's coming from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then in chat as well, DIY Film says, "Am I crazy, or did that Aldhani chief look exactly like Bryan Cranston?"
I thought that too. I had that same for a second. I was like, "Is that Bryan Cranston?" It was not, but
called David Heyman, and he was in a lot of British stuff.
Yeah, I could definitely see the Bryan Cranston for sure.
Yeah. I also saw some stuff in chat saying, did they cast the guy who looks like Cranston on purpose? They had to know that would be so noticeable. It's also DIY film following up with that.
I think that guy is like 10 years older than Bryan Cranston, maybe, but he definitely has a Cranston-esque look.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah, we love a Bryan Cranston.
We love a Cranston here.
Yep,
sure.
Yep. And a Stellan Skarsgård, like
who does? He's killing
I
it.
truly at the end of the episode, and he's okay. By the way, barely in this episode.
No, yeah,
barely in this episode.
It's all in the face. It's just
yes,
physical acting.
And I truly said at the end, I said out loud at the end of the episode, God, Stellan Skarsgård's so good on this show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I continue to be so impressed by everything that Andor is putting forward, because it's just it's such confident writing and storytelling, and I so often feel like I learn more about characters' relationships with one another in a 3-minute scene than I've ever learned about the relationship between some characters like in Star Wars. And the thing is it's not necessarily as important in other stories, but this entire show is really driven by these personal, I'm trying to think of the word that, very close knit, human relationships.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's all I got in our AMA questions. So thanks, chat, for watching along with us today. Thanks for asking your questions. Thank you, Kim, for staying out after your workday and wrapping things up with us here. And that's going to do it for this episode of our Andor spoiler reviews here on Fandom Entertainment. Again, we will be back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. for that She-Hulk finale. So tune in to see what kind of cocktail Kim has concocted for herself, and also if her head is still attached after she takes her choker off, inevitably. Thank you all so much, and we will see you again soon. Goodbye.